Welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
Hey, Kevin, did we get permission to rebroadcast to our regular Facebook pages?
I think we did.
That's
I think we're
wild.
back.
That's
Yeah.
wild. We're back. We're everywhere.
I mean, 20
I
minutes
didn't-
late, but we're back.
That's awesome. We are coming in late because, of course, I don't know. My computer decided to misbehave, and I don't even know how I fixed it. To be perfectly honest with you,
You turned it off and turned it back on again. That's all you got to do.
I did. I unplugged some stuff. I plugged it back in. Boom. Here we are. It's
What
beautiful.
matters. But all right, we got a few things. We're going to talk about a lot of New York State stuff, local stuff today. We're going to talk about the New York State ballot initiatives because I feel like half the time you walk to the voter booth and you're like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
So we figured we might as well talk to it. I don't know that they're like super excited. They're both debt related.
Of course.
So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about City of Rochester thinking of banning all short-term rentals, think like Airbnb stuff. They just had a city council I don't know, seminar type of thing on it today where you could go and speak to city council. But following that closely, and we'll talk about New York's continued record of successful tax subsidies for technology companies and how it's worked out.
Oh yeah, we got to talk about that. And my hero, George Santos.
George Santos, oh goodness,
survives.
George
And then maybe we'll talk about the moral obligations involved in asymmetrical warfare and what a blank check from the United States may. I'm unhappy. I'm sad. I think a lot of people are. I think that the world is concerned. But I think it's more important to talk about these local things. Our local tyranny is more important than international tyranny, perhaps.
I mean, yeah, we got to talk about that stuff a little bit. And, maybe it depends on when we get to in the show. Maybe we'll get to it in the radio show. Maybe we'll save it for the podcast portion.
Right, fair enough.
We'll see what we get to. But I think either way, we're going to jump in a minute. Of course, leave your comments if you got them. We'll leave them on the show. Stuff is good. But we're going to go in just a few seconds. 5.
Now, an hour of clarity for exhausted people of our nation mired in toxic partisanship. Left versus right, us versus them. While we pay to keep our politicians fighting, how do we, the people, rise up and solve the great challenges of our time? We do it by embracing freedom and liberty. There may be no such thing as a free lunch, but this hour is as close as it gets. Welcome to A Free Solution.
All right, welcome to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant O'Connor.
I'm here, Kevin.
I'm
just
right.
here.
Yeah, you're here. You're here.
That's
you're
it.
Doing your thing. Your technology's working. It's all good.
Yeah. I mean, it's all good. It could go out on us at any moment. Why? I'm not good with technology, guys. Like it gives me stress. I'm very happy when it works. When it stops working, I kind of lose my mind. So we had a little problem with that tonight, but I'm okay now. Everything's fine.
What's up?
Yeah.
We're all good. Doing the radio show. Thanks for joining us here on WYSL, or if you're listening online, we're back on all of our Facebook pages now. The Kevin Wilson Facebook page, the Free Solution Facebook page, the Tim O'Connor Facebook page. We're on all those places, plus YouTube, plus Twitter, plus the group, all those places. If you're listening on WYSL, you want to participate, we have a Facebook group where people post stuff and share show ideas and have discussions occasionally. Make sure you join that too. So couple things we're going to talk about. We got a lot of local stuff today. We might get to some heady international philosophical type stuff later in the show, but we're gonna talk about a few local things. We're gonna talk about the New York State ballot proposals because of course voting has started. Like you can already vote, Tim. You can. We talk a little bit about local elections too, but you can already vote. Early voting and then election.
Voting is violence, Kevin, and I abhor violence, so I don't know that I'm going to vote this year.
Just gonna abstain. Fair enough, man. I get it. I'm tempted to as well, but we're talking about the New York State ballot proposals. We're gonna talk about a possible ban on short-term rentals in Rochester. They just had a meeting about it today. Curious how it turned out. I only caught bits and pieces of what was happening there. But short-term rentals is like Airbnb and Verbo type of stuff. Basically looking at banning in most of the city any rentals less than like 30 days. So yeah, so we'll talk about that, and then maybe a company leaving after getting New York State tax breaks.
Imagine that. Just
Yeah,
imagine the credit farmers scoring big, writing a great contract and saying, "Thanks for your money.
yeah,
See you later, suckers."
yeah. So we'll talk we'll talk a bit about that. It's something that was a big story, and it's unfortunately it's one of those things we'll connect it to like just because you're subsidizing someone doesn't mean they're going to be successful, and doesn't mean you set up the environment for them to be successful even with subsidies, and that's the more important part. But anyway, let's talk about these New York State ballot initiatives. There's going to be two of them, and they are both related to debt. I don't know, like these ones, like I'm not as fired up about them as as some of the other ones, like because they're kind of straightforward, like in the weeds type of stuff. So the first one is removal of small city schools districts from special constitutional debt limitation. And basically what it says is that certain small cities that aren't part of like the big five districts, so not like Rochester, Buffalo, etc., they have a limitation on how much debt they can take on for stuff, right? It's 5%. And it only applies to small cities, not the big districts or some rural and suburban districts, just small cities under 125,000 people. And there's a state rule that says you can't take on more than like 10% debt, right? So basically 10% of all your assets. And what this proposal does is of all taxable real estate in the district. So they could do 5% now. They want to go to the state rule that says they can go up to 10% of taxable real estate in the district if they
That
want
is gonna
to.
be so good for the kids all over the state because as we know, the more money that they throw at the educational system in New York State, the more success we have. Oh, wait,
Yeah.
that's not how it works, but okay.
Turns out, no, it is not how it works. And like to me, like I kind of get it. Like a small district might need to like take on like a significant capital project to like build a new building, and that's something that long term makes sense. They need to issue a bond or whatever, sure, right?
Yeah. Does it
Okay, maybe, or people abuse it, and
I
uh, they take on a significant amount of debt that they're then going to have to bail themselves out with either requesting the raise taxes, which is capped by the property tax cap plus the ballot, right? You have to vote on your taxes, or they'll and I don't know what the rules around this in New York State are, but I was just listening to like maybe a Planet Money podcast about it or something about schools going to like 4 days a week and stuff. Wild.
Sure, sure. Why
It's
not?
it's something that happened in a lot. I haven't heard about it much in New York State. Like, and if someone knows of it happening in New York State, or if it's even legal, let me know. But like other places, they're just like, well, uh, we can't raise taxes. We kind of ran out of money, so we're just going to cut a day of schooling out. And
I do our schools even serve our kids anymore? I mean, I know that that's incredibly insulting to a lot of people that have dedicated their lives to education, but we've got to face some facts about New York State's performance. Number one, and number two, is throwing money at a school system, is that going to solve the meta problem that we see in New York State of we're losing population, Kevin?
we're
Like
losing
we're not.
population, and even within districts, we're losing. Students are leaving. Well, families are leaving the public school system too. That's
Sure.
it's
We
also
can
part
fix
of
that
it.
by throwing money at it, right? Like,
Yeah, I mean, if that worked, city of Rochester would be fixed by now. They keep saying they're underfunded, but my goodness, it's a lot of money per student in the city of Rochester, and it has not fixed the problem. And again, there's a lot of other complicated reasons why that happened, but like money in and of itself doesn't fix these things. And again, I'm not, to me, like I'm not actually fundamentally against like debt. What I'm against is the irresponsible use of debt. Again, you can take on a capital project that totally makes sense, right? debt in and of itself is an evil. Unmanageable debt is. Like,
Sure.
like you take on a loan to like get a house, right? Like, I don't think you should have to buy your houses in cash. I think it's fine to get a loan to do that. It might make sense for you. The same way a district might need to get a loan, take on debt to build a new building or something. Fine. It's whatever. It's just how much makes sense given the district, given the assets that they have, the assets being like how much they can confiscate from us property owners. And are they able to sustain that given the other operations of the district while paying off that debt? I don't know. I said I don't like again. I don't know how I feel about this specific proposal, but I do know that I'm worried about a lot of districts and what they would end up doing with this. And I want to get this comment from Sam on YouTube too, who says, I bet if they created a school choice program, we wouldn't have to worry about school debt limits. Maybe. I mean, there's a lot of if you have like a semi private school situation, like they're gonna have to go to like actual like creditors and other folks to get like corporate bonds to like do capital projects, and they're gonna evaluate whether or not they can do that. It's like a totally different process.
It is. There's some accountability in that process.
Exactly.
And here with what we see with our local school districts, and again, this is with all due respect to people that have dedicated their lives to teaching and trying to make our situation better for our kids. We're ignoring, again, the meta problem of people leaving. We're ignoring the fact that one of the reasons people are leaving is because of the high tax burden already. I just don't think that, again, this just sounds to me like, all right, our local school needs a new track, right? And look, in my area, Kevin, a bunch of these schools have very nice facilities, and they still have to combine schools to get a full team of soccer players, or to get a full team of track runners, or to get a full team of basketball
That's how it was
players.
in my area. We combined soccer teams with Oriskany and Westmoreland.
Yeah. So you're from this same situation. That area too is declining. Our area, there aren't as many kids going to school. There definitely aren't as many kids playing sports. And we're combined. My kid has to wrestle for Cooperstown, and he goes to Milford, which is great. And I appreciate the opportunity that Cooperstown has offered him. It's wonderful that he gets it. But we're not dealing with the real problems, Kevin. The real problems is the lack of industry, the high taxation, the death of farming, all of these things that we're just not paying attention to. And so go ahead, borrow more money. I don't care.
Yeah, a bunch of other stuff. Again, and like a lot of districts there, can do this. They can already do like 10% of the taxable real estate in the area. It's just specifically small cities have like this limit. For this purpose, which again kind of stinks if you're a small city district. But yeah, and I want to bring this up from Sam too. Sam on YouTube says pre-K to 12 would cost about $325,000 per kid in Rochester. 71% graduated after 4 years, and more than 50% are 2+ grade levels behind in reading and math. Yeah, no, it's expensive.
Yeah, that's a success story right there.
Yeah, it's expensive, and the city of Rochester, unfortunately, like again, it's no disrespect to the people who are trying to make it work, like the teachers in the system. I have friends who are doing that, but like, yeah, it's not working that well. Like something different needs to be done. So
there's another good comment out there too, because this is an area Facebook user says we need to get a line by line breakdown of the proposed budget. In my opinion, there's always that yearly shakedown that goes on when it comes to school budget time, right? Like they'll put on a play and everybody goes in who has kids in the play and votes yes. And
I remember that trick.
Yeah, it's a great trick. It's very effective, but they've removed any kind of level of accountability for the way that they spend their money to the people that they're taking the money from. And
right now, like a lot of this stuff, the thing is, like you can get it if you want to, right? Like you can get that line by line breakdown of like school budgets. Like it's available. The thing is that like most people don't have the time to do it. Even some of those who have the time to do it aren't necessarily going to understand what it is. And most people, they're gonna vote based on vibes, right? Like they're either gonna vote for it because they want to like vote for like a budget increase because they think their school's doing something good and they don't really care about the money or whatever, or they're going to vote against it because their taxes. Like, unfortunately, like, it's just not everyone's doing this like super informed. Some are, but like, you got to really work to like get in there and understand it. And if you want to like vote on like these school budgets, if you even have the option to, like Rochester, we don't do that. Like, because we live in a big city. So we just we're at the mercy of the school board, who is also at the mercy of the state.
That's a good point too, right? Like there's a instead of locally organized kind of endeavors in education, it's a very top-down structure saying you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way. Here's extra money if you do it exactly our way, or if you bring in this controversial new subject or whatever. And so,
well, in I think we might have had him on this show too, but there's a guy who's like one of the founders of the Genesee County Libertarian Party, who is a school board member out in Batavia. Phil Rickey was the guy, and he might have been before your time, actually, Tim. But like he would talk about this a lot. He's like he was a school board member, he was libertarian, and he's just like, there's so much you can't do. Like you're like, local school boards have so much less power than you think, because like everything's mixed in with like state requirements and federal incentives, and like they need to kind of go with the federal incentives to keep the lights on because of the state requirements, and like their actual level of like flexibility in determining stuff isn't that big. And so
I understand for sure. So
and so like when people talk about like, we don't need school choice, you have accountability through school boards, it's nonsense, because like you don't, even if you elect good people to school board, and that's a big if. Like city of Rochester, like probably not going to be a big flip anytime soon. It does happen sometimes, happened out in like San Francisco, weirdly enough, like last year. But even if you do that, you're still fighting state and federal stuff too, and it's hard to get any like significant change in a way that's going to like seriously improve like conditions for students in the city of Rochester. So if you're a parent with any level of knowledge and resources, what do? You leave, you pick a private school, you try to get into one of the charters that are available. But for most parents, like the choice in a way that they have like backpack funding in other places, it just ain't there. It's difficult for parents to understand it and much less access it. That's what it is. I didn't mean to make this a whole school rant. This is supposed to mostly be about the ballot initiatives. Look, real quick, because we'll close out this segment with this stuff. We'll talk about the second one too, which is, again, also about debt. It is was the text of the amendment is extending sewage project debt exclusion from debt limit. Basically, if you're a small town and you want to build a sewage treatment and disposal construction project, right as of right now, that does not apply to your municipality's debt limit, and they are extending that another 10 years. It expires in January 1st, 2024. They're saying extend that to 2034. This has been going on since like, I think like the 60s. Like, it's been going on for a while.
So in other words, like, spare no expense if you want a sanitary system that's townwide. Like, again, I'm in rural, like we don't have those things here. We don't do it that way. We have septic systems, each individually owned by individual people who maintain them or don't and suffer the consequences. So as long as it doesn't hurt me, you guys go ahead and spend all the money you want, you city folk.
Tim's like, not in my town, but whatever. But like probably a village down the road from you, like they might have a municipal like sewage treatment facility type of thing, but
maybe.
So they can, debt limits don't matter. It hasn't mattered for a while, so this is probably going to pass. It's just an extension of something New York State's been doing for a while, but figured like, again, I don't like I like to research this stuff. I don't like to go in surprise. If you're listening to this, either Wednesday night or Thursday night, wherever you're listening, figured I could go in, look it up if you want more information.
So the ballot initiatives are debt limit related, and both of them basically encourage more spending, I would say.
Yeah. So if that leads you to vote no, then so be it. If you're like, no, small towns should be able to take on more debt, small cities for schools and sewage treatment plants. All right.
You can do it that way, I guess.
That's your thing. It's probably going to go that direction. By the way, we're out of time for this segment. Thanks again for joining us here on the Free Solution on WSL. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. All right. So segment 1 done.
That was like 17 and a half minutes. Is that correct?
17 and a half minutes?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. I put down the wrong time. It was supposed to be 22, and I put the wrong time. That's all right. We're gonna make the next. We're gonna make the next segment 2 minutes longer.
Okay, perfect.
That's fine.
I'm just glad I caught it. Like I was kind of. I'm like, it seems like we're going out early here.
Yeah. Oops, my bad on that, guys.
I apologize, Rochester.
Yeah, I put 20:30 instead of 22:30. It's all right. Doesn't really matter. It's not like so back in the day when we were doing like the live show, it mattered a lot more. Also because we were syndicated, we used to be on like WENY and WACK. WNY doesn't even exist anymore. WACK stopped picking us up after we moved after the like noon spot, but
they were bought by some left-leaning outfit, was my understanding.
WENY? I thought it was like a Christian music station or something.
Oh, that could be it.
Yeah, other direction. No, so they just wanted to do music, and WACK they're just like, nah, like we just wanted the noon for it. They didn't even really need it. It's all good. So anyway, we'll come back and we'll talk about the Rochester banning Airbnb. Now I'm gonna give some context for you folks who are listening who are out of town. I'm gonna give some context to some of this stuff and what's going on, and then talk about like what they're actually gonna do and why they're gonna do it and why it's a dumb idea. It's so dumb. Ridiculous.
It's a bad idea. So that's what I would say,
Yeah. I would agree. All right. So we're going to go back in like 20 seconds or so. Got good comments. Make sure you leave those wherever you're leaving comments, wherever. So we're going to be back in 10 seconds. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson here today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Variant. I'm Connor.
I'm here, Kevin, and we're going to talk about a subject that's very near and dear to my heart, actually. It's a freedom-based subject. It's a technological innovation. And so, Rochester, you're telling me here, you and I were talking before the show, you're telling me Rochester's talking about banning short-term rentals.
Short-term rentals, that's right. So short-term rentals being like Airbnb type of stuff, like Verbo type of stuff, that sort of thing. There's a bunch of other companies out there too. And so they're Rochester is reforming its zoning code right now. Some stuff that's good, but a lot of stuff that is, well, disappointing. And one of those things that's disappointing is they're almost completely banning short-term rentals. Basically, most of the city, about 3/4 of the city, it'll be impossible to do that. You won't be able to have like tenant agreements that are less than 31 days. So, 30-day agreements, month to month, I guess not technically allowed now. Probably won't be enforced. Most of this is supposed to go after like the short-term rental market, the Airbnb folks, right?
Sure.
And so again, this part of this whole zoning reform process that's supposed to be happening, even though like the zoning code itself, or like the kind of comprehensive plan document that goes into this, it talks about like forming partnerships with short-term rental companies to develop like regulations and like, make sure that they're tax appropriate, and they're supposed to get a certificate of occupancy, right? So they make sure they're safe. Like, so all this stuff that's like not totally unreasonable, right? Like even as a libertarian, I'm kind of like, yeah, if someone's renting out their house as a short-term rental, like I get why the city wants to make sure it's safe. Fair
Sure.
enough. Like, I can quibble over whether or not it's wise regulation, but it's reasonable sounding to most people. What's not reasonable to me is effectively banning all of these things, right? Which again doesn't just impact people going on vacation in the city. It also impacts like people like nurses who are on short-term contracts, traveling nurses. It affects business people who get short-term rentals. They don't want to stay in a long-term hotel. They'd rather like stay in an apartment. And all those things are legitimate, like ways of doing business, and the city is just thinking of blanket banning them. And there's kind of two big things driving this in the city. And again, I know some of the folks are like, oh, well, like I would never stay in the city anyway. Listen to WSL. Like, well, yeah, like, but it's not for you though. It's like, again, people traveling, people on business. There's lots of great stuff in safe neighborhoods. This is a thing that makes sense for some people who don't necessarily want to like stay out in Henrietta and drive in 30 minutes every day. It's just not what makes sense to everyone. But two main reasons driving it. So one is uh it's like a kind of safety and neighborhood disruption issue, right? Some of which is like somewhat legitimate. Like there was a short-term rental in my neighborhood where 5 people were shot. One of them died. And again, this is in my neighborhood. And the short-term rental situation was someone from Rochester rented it out, threw a party in there. They're not supposed to do that anyway. That's like against like Airbnb's like terms of service. They're not supposed to do that. They got kicked off of all the platforms after this happened. But like someone threw a house party, there's a fight, people got shot. People don't like house parties when that type of thing happens. That's not what's happening in most situations though, right?
Now let me ask you this though,
Right.
Kevin. Just to put it out there, had this house party happened at somebody else's house, I mean, let's say it didn't end up at an Airbnb. Could
Right.
could the same like net result have happened? Is there occasionally parties in Rochester that get unruly? I guess is what I'm saying.
There is. There is.
Imagine that.
It is a thing that happens in Rochester,
Yeah,
unfortunately, far too often. Sometimes house parties get out of hand and there's violence. Like that's a thing that happened. It is not exclusive to short-term rentals. But some people, including folks in my neighborhood, have said like, nope, we got to just ban these things because like look what can happen, right? Even though like in my neighborhood there's several of these, and a lot of them are just used by people who are staying with relatives who are in the neighborhood and maybe want a little bit of space to themselves, which I get. Like
yeah, I can
sometimes, like
understand that.
if I'm staying somewhere a week, like I'd kind of rather have my own space, but want to be close by, and like especially now that I have a kid, like it's sort of easier to have something like maybe a little bit more robust than a hotel room sometimes. Like that's something that I want. Again, if you don't want that, you can stay at a hotel. There's still options, but this is how people use it. Or again, they're here for a job interview, just want somewhere comfortable. Whatever reason, it doesn't even matter what those reasons are. They could be good or dumb. It doesn't matter, like because
Yeah,
it's their choice.
I,
Like who
I have
cares? It's not your business.
I have a major criticism of banning Airbnbs. Okay, um,
Mhm.
one of which is that local people own a couple of properties. It's a middle class side hustle. They've already basically made renting out property, so tenuous and difficult that the only way for a middle class person to have this kind of property owning side hustle is to do it through Airbnb. They ban them. Where are these people going to end up going? They're going to have to be, if they're still going to come to Rochester, they're going to end up staying in hotels. And who does that benefit? That doesn't benefit a local property owner, some middle class kid with a side hustle. It doesn't do anything. It just ends up making big, powerful corporations richer. Like I could
Yeah.
just see like Holiday Inn going in there and be like, you know what, you guys need to do, ban Airbnbs, and then, oh
But that's kind of
yeah,
like what they did in New York City. That's totally it. It was the hotel lobby being like, "Oh, these short-term rentals are causing so much trouble. You should ban them." And no,
yeah,
it was totally a money play. Now, like the hotel industry is a bit less robust in like the city of Rochester. There's only like a few big hotels, but that's part of it. And like it's weird because like that sort of segues into the other justification where it's like, oh, it's these big property owners who are renting out dozens of short-term rentals, and they're just using those to rake in profit, and because they're doing that, it's making a housing shortage, and that's why the rent is rising in Rochester. No, it's
Okay.
not because
Yeah.
it's impossible to build anything here in Rochester. It's because those greedy property owners are just turning all the good rental property into short-term rentals. Tim, what do you think of that?
Well, as I may have talked about this very subject on this very show, because locally we have houses falling into the ground, and one of our solutions to the declining population in New York State is to ban Airbnbs. Now we're a touristy area, um, and so we haven't banned them yet, but we've put moratoriums on them having more, and we still it hasn't solved any of the problems. The schools are still shrinking. There's still houses falling into the ground in the areas where the moratoriums are in place. Like you can go through the village of Milford and you can see 3 or 4 houses that are falling in the ground. Nobody has any interest in them. Now, I'm not saying that Airbnb necessarily solves that problem, but Airbnb could solve that problem. And
Right.
and so we get caught up in this virtuous cycle of, oh, those guys are taking something from us. They're not. Most of the people that have Airbnbs have families here. Like this is the
Yeah.
part that confuses me.
So
Like,
there's a lot of them. Again, I like because I know folks who do have like a lot of properties too, but they live here. They, like
yeah,
they're just business owners in the area, and some are like bigger, some are smaller, and like a lot of times that's an incentive to improve a property too. Like they have like a property that might otherwise go into somewhat disrepair. Like now there's like a business reason to keep it up and to improve it, to invest in it, and that's
yeah,
good for the housing stock because a lot of times these short-term rentals too, like sometimes they'll stay a short-term rental for like a couple years and then they'll rent it out for a couple years too. Like the stuff moves around.
yeah.
And that's the point of keeping this like flexible too, because like you will go where like the market takes you. Is there a higher need for short-term rentals? Then they'll do that. Is there a higher need for like longer term housing? People will do that. They will go where the market incentivizes them to go.
I can again attest to exactly what you're saying. Um, I bought a house that was falling into disrepair that nobody wanted. It had been on the market for months. I bought the house. I cleaned it up. I rented it out to Airbnb, um, baseball people. Made a decent amount of money. Decided that that wasn't really for me, and because that's how I roll, like, and I
Mhm.
sold it, and now there's a family with 2 kids living there. So, like, it was an absolute net positive. Had I not taken that risk, made a little bit of money from Airbnb, this thing probably would have still be falling in the ground. Like, it would be gone by now. Like I
Yeah,
took
right.
a big action there. I took a big risk. I got a decent payoff for it, sure, but there was a lot of risk going into that. Like,
Tim, I mean, and Tim, you're allowed to make a profit if you're adding value.
I
Like,
know I
and I
shouldn't
know you
apologize
already know
for that.
that, right? Like, it's
Big money.
if someone is adding value to a community, it is good if they make profit. It's fine if they make profit. I don't like it when they're not adding any value and they're raking in a bunch of money. But if you're adding value by improving a property, that's a good thing.
Thank you, Kevin. I
Yes.
was feeling pretty good about it, but now I feel even better. That's great.
Capitalism is a good thing, Tim.
Yeah,
But
we made a substantial investment in this property too, and it was
yeah.
really a very much a net positive for the entire neighborhood.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like again, part of this reason of being like, well, it's taking good housing off the market. That's nonsense. Again, and there's an easy way to fix it too. There's an easy way to if we do have a housing shortage. Let's say short-term rentals were actually causing housing shortage, which I don't think is true. But if they were, we can fix that. All we got to do is make it easier for people to build stuff. That's it. That's the whole solution. Just let people build stuff.
Crazy.
I
That's
know.
you're
Like just
insane, Kevin.
Just
That's
have
not
a
how
bunch of
any of
stuff
this works.
that's, like, built by right now, like, to build a single family home on so many properties, you have to get, like, a half dozen variances just to do that. It ends up costing a ton of money just to build what is a normal home in the neighborhood that looks like every other house. To build an apartment building is a whole rigmarole where you have to go and get all this community input and do several redesigns and, dedicate some of it to, like, affordable housing, and you can't have over a certain amount market rate. It ends up being bonkers instead of just letting people build stuff because we've seen in like there's now some substantial evidence worldwide what happens when you liberalize zoning laws when you make it easier for people to just build stuff. Rents go down, not like stop growing. They actually go down. Like it makes it cheaper to live places. All you got to do is let freedom happen. You just let people build stuff and make it easy for people to build stuff. Again, not talking about like just getting rid of all like safety precautions, none of that stuff. Just like, hey, this is an area where there's demand for apartments. Let's just build apartments based on like all the other codes that exist and safety regulations that we have. That's it. Because it's not the safety regulations that are killing people, it's everything else.
That seems pretty simple, Kevin. I don't see how it could possibly be successful without the virtuous hand of government stepping in and, I don't know, messing it up somehow, which they already have.
No, I mean, they probably will. Everyone wants to have their piece in there. And again, that's, and like some of these folks, like some are well-intentioned where they talk about like, well, like we don't have enough affordable housing. Again, the solution to that is to just let people build. Housing will get cheaper. But I would grant them the good intention of like, we think that there should be some like low income housing in this area. Like they think they're doing good,
Right?
But they're not, but they think they're doing good.
Right.
And then there's the folks who are like, who don't want to build because they're, you know, worried that if enough housing gets built there, the property prices will go down. And that's, you know,
yeah,
the whole other thing.
Well, I've wandered down the tenants' rights issue before too, when it comes to this homeless crisis. Okay, this
Right.
too many people, not enough places to live, kind of thing. And when I look at tenants' rights and I look at the risk of renting a room to someone, it's astronomical. It's completely unfair,
So
and
another reason why people are going to short-term rentals, it feels less risky.
it is less risky. I'm going
Yeah.
to be perfectly honest. I had other types of rentals when I was younger, and I lost my butt. It was miserable. It was awful. It was horrible. You can't get rid of people. They destroy your place. There's no like criminal punishment. There's no financial remuneration for it. It's brutal. It's absolutely brutal. And people who do it are crazy, right? Like they're
Yeah.
so if we fix these things with freedom and individual property rights and we take care of people, like a property owner that's renting out a room is not making a killing. They're not some vicious profiteer rent seeking, enemy of the state, hating their neighbor. They're just trying to make ends meet, like
Yeah.
it's ridiculous where we are in society about this and who gets the benefits and who doesn't. And I'm not saying it to be mean. A lot of this homelessness is because people are afraid to rent out properties, take any risk at all renting out properties.
No, I mean that's definitely part of it. Like, because like part of the this issue is that, a bunch of those, I think, and we've talked about this a bunch before, but like there's a bunch of folks who are like kind of on the bubble that like a change in average rent by like, a few dozen dollars means that like they're able to get like housing and support themselves, right? And so like these regulations can have a big impact. And those two things are: one, are people able to build? Is there more housing causing downward pressure on like the price of rent in that market? And then two is, is there incentive for people to like rent out stuff to tenants long term on like year leases or whatever versus short term rentals or just selling the property or whatever? And New York State, especially over the last 3 years, has made that much, much harder. Again, done this with maybe the good intention of like, well, we don't want to just put people out on the streets. We can't have those mean landlords just kick people out. But then you have a lot of people, and again, I saw this happen to my neighbor, for goodness sakes, like who are just like, they own 1 or 2 properties, and suddenly a tenant doesn't pay rent for a year. They can't evict them. They destroy the place. It's going to take tens of thousands of dollars to fix it up. They don't have the money to do this. And this guy ended up staying in it, but like other folks might be like, all right, forget it. I'm just going to sell to a bigger property owner because they have the cash to take the hit when something like that happens.
Yeah,
And so
BlackRock has a whole system ready to go. They'll come right in.
Right. And so that's what ends up happening. And that's how it ends up benefiting the big guys. And then it ends up helping the very people that like the progressives say they're mad at. So it kills me.
That's a fantastic point, right? The law of unintended consequences, right? We're going to stop rich people from making money off of renting out shabby homes to poor people. So now poor people are on the streets, middle class people are struggling, and taxes are going ever higher. And thank you for your kind, benevolent, nonsense.
Your good intentions do not matter consequences do. That's what's important. Anyway, we're heading up on break now. Thanks again for joining us here on A Free Solution on WYSL. We're going to be back in just a few minutes. Talk to you soon. All right. We got 17 minutes on that one.
Okay. And that's good, right?
Yes, that's good.
Okay.
And we'll get to a couple of these comments too. Sam says, Kevin is 100% spot on. I have friends that describe that exact scenario happening to them.
Yeah.
And Shelly says, everyone gets funneled through the planning board.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
nice.
They have like seekers for everything now. Every little small business has to file as some sort of seeker. There's a short form seeker and the long form seeker, and like no small business is going to go through the extensive process of a long form seeker. So if they don't have the right to do a short form seeker, that's it. They're not coming. They're not going to open up businesses, and that's what New York State's lacking, right? Like the entrepreneurial spirit, the basic freedom to develop your property the way you want to. It's like wild times, man, and they just don't wake up to it, even though guys like us are trying to tell them.
Yeah, there are ways that we can make things better. It just requires a lot of like peeling back again. And some of it is so buried in like what seems like good intentions. Like, and again, actually, have you ever seen that the Reason series, like Andrew Heaton and the other guy do, where they say they have the I'm gonna have to share a series. It's like
The law of unintended
consequences.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they do a bunch of them. They're awesome, and
yeah.
it's
So
always
those
like,
are great. Like it's all that stuff, and that's like what like a whole bunch of rental stuff is.
yeah. They have one in England where it's like they were taxing people in England on the number of windows that they had in their building.
Yeah.
So people were like just bricking up their windows. They're like, there, we'll fix you, tax man.
Yep. So yeah, this bricked up their windows and people had less ventilation, but they figured like, oh, the more windows, the richer the person is. So we'll just, but yeah, look up Great Moments and Unintended Consequences. It's a Reason TV series. But
it's really good. They have a number of them. I'm trying to think. The window one was the one that leaped right out at me because we're on the subject of housing, but they have one about the law of unintended consequences of releasing, using animals to control other animals. It's like, it's pretty fun.
Oh, the whole Cobra thing in India.
Yeah, the Cobra thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Which again, if you don't know about that one, that's like a famous one where they tried to control the population of cobras. They put an incentive to hunt them, and what ended up happening is that people just started breeding cobras because
the incentives were so awesome. People are like, let's make baby cobras and sell them.
Yeah, if we make a bunch of cobras and then like kill them and give them to the authorities, this is a profit generating business.
So then what happens when they do away with the law, Kevin?
They release all the cobras, and now you have more cobras than ever.
That's what happened. Oh my God, it was good stuff.
Yeah, there's another one like kind of related where they did it with like rats or something, and the bounty was on like rat tails, and so they would just like cut off the tails of rats instead of like actually killing the rats.
Yeah, it is the law of unintended consequences. Keeps coming back to bite us. There's a question out there: what can be done to subvert legacy right? Welcome to the show. What can be done to subvert the erroneous building codes that local and state governments put into place to derail true market value housing booms? I think they're basically put in place for grift and graft and to be able to sell access to your politicians. So if you buy the right politician, you can work your way around those things.
Well, I'll give you like a less cynical answer in that like the truth is like a bunch of states are like starting to like wake up to this. They're starting to be like, oh, this is so harmful to us. It's so harmful to our constituents that they're facing actual consequences in elections for it, which again is a slow process. But some places like California included, like their housing issues are so bad that they started to pass like zoning reform there, where it's like easier to build, apartment buildings by right instead of having to go through special processes at like several levels and go through several community meetings in order to build like a normal, like just normal apartment building, something that in a city should be able to just be built without having to jump through a bunch of hoops.
Yeah.
So you're starting to see a bunch of that stuff like by right zoning where like they have a few things that are approved. So unless you're doing something real weird, you shouldn't have to go through like whole variance process. Or they're making it so like if cities do push, big variance processes and then they lose, the consequences are that like these builders can build like something a bit more aggressive. That's the fun stuff that's happening in like San Francisco, where they decided to build like a 20-story building instead of like a 3-story one out of spite.
Oh, that's cool. That's very cool. I hadn't caught that story. That's great.
Yeah. So yeah, great question. And getting other stuff to Vince also bringing up like that you're getting that tenants are getting rights to like free legal representation, getting rights on landlord tenant issues too, which like again, like one of those things that's well intentioned, but if you're getting legal representation and the lawyers are doing their job, which they have to, it's going to drag stuff out and make stuff more expensive for the landlord, which means that the smaller landlords can't compete anymore, and it's just going to be the big guys.
Yeah, and they're just going to raise their rates, and that's it. And also, let's give Vince himself a little shout out for boldly entering the legal profession and successfully passing the bar exam in the state of Virginia. Congratulations, bud. I know it's been a couple months, but congratulations. He did the work. He was a big New York libertarian, one of our elected libertarians, and decided to go back to law school, and now he is a board certified, I don't know, bar certified lawyer. So congratulations, brother.
No, congratulations. And shout out to Shelly, who's apparently going to be on a brain injury podcast too. Good luck, Shelly, watching us for tips. Now, I don't know if that's the best idea, but like, good luck. I hope that works out for you.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting for sure. Send me a link, Shelly. I want to check it out.
Yeah, that's great.
I've met Shelly in person. She's wonderful. She's going to have a good time on the podcast. That's for sure.
But all right, we should probably get back to the actual show, and I think we're going to talk about some tax break issues, and then we can decide to jump into the heavy issue of asymmetric warfare, or we could just talk about like the milk carton shortage or something. We can talk about that too.
Maybe we
depends on how much time we
warfare. I'm frustrated, but we'll see what happens. We'll see how the next segment goes.
Yeah, so we got one more segment, folks. So we're gonna go back in. Well, now we're gonna go back in about 20 seconds because I missed the mark that I was gonna hit. And yeah, we'll go from there. All right, back in 10. Welcome back to A Free Solution. I'm Kevin Wilson here today, joined by Tim, the Freedom Marion O'Connor.
How's it going, Kevin? I'm here, man.
We're here. We're doing the thing. We're talking about zoning. We're talking about it during the break. We ended up talking a bunch about zoning too. So if you listen on WYSL, we do have good discussions, and we read a bunch of user comments during the break. So make sure you catch the full podcast anywhere you can find podcasts. We have extra content. We're probably going to do some bonus stuff after the show too. But this segment, we're moving on from short-term rentals and banning those and all that stuff. And we're going to talk about another big project that got a lot of hype in Rochester. Unfortunately, it's not working out. The lithium recycling stuff, Li-Cycle in Rochester, they're supposed to bring 275 jobs to Rochester. They're supposed to get millions of taxpayer dollars in loans and stuff. And now it's not working. There's supposed to be a big thing in East Bend Business Park, and they decide that they're going to pause and review. And we bring these up occasionally just because, again, this is a big thing. Like Chuck Schumer came out and they touted all the politicians are there, big exciting thing, and then just poof, it's done.
It's a wild event that politicians can't figure out that credit farming is one of the most lucrative forms of business, that people will take government money to do a study to see if a business like Lycorp could be feasible. They'll even go so far as to break ground, and then when their profit from getting money from the government is maximized, and they realize that their business model is horrible and that it was always horrible, boom, this is what happens, right? They just say, oh, the numbers aren't working out anymore because of inflation, or because Russia invaded Ukraine, or some other nonsense, and they have
Yeah.
clauses in their contracts that allow them to escape
Now,
without penalty.
so in actually in this case, it's sort of like the best case scenario, because there's before a lot of this money got distributed. There's a lot of hype about it, but like they didn't get the federal money yet. They're supposed to get it like soon. They're supposed to get all these pilot breaks and all this stuff, and then it just stopped. But and I bring this up. I still want to bring it up anyway, because what usually happened is what Tim talks about.
Yeah.
Is like what with like the Tesla stuff out in like Buffalo, right? Like in a bunch of other places too. Like what usually happens is they get a bunch of money, they start building something, they operate at a loss for a few years, and then they either ask for more money or they're done, right? Like, and
Imagine that.
unfortunately, like that happens like way too often.
So what was that? The Syracuse project, Sun Microsystems,
Micron,
Micron. Okay,
yeah,
yeah, they were promising ahead of the election 50,000 jobs. After the election, they're like, nah, maybe it's going to be more like 2,000, and now it's like, we don't even know if it's going to get to 2,000 jobs. Like, and they got big government money from New York State, federal money, and all sorts of stuff. Like it's just
yeah.
wild.
No, they got a bunch of. Well, again, maybe it'll end up working out. Maybe it'll end up being good. Like there's a bunch of these projects, and like I know, like the promoters of these things, they'll be like, well, you don't pay attention to, you don't talk about the projects that work. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's like sometimes they work, but it's like y'all overpromise so often. And like even the ones that do work, they end up like, if they even meet expectations, like it's just barely, or they come close to it, and like we kind of drop it off the radar. And those aren't the ones like people get real mad about, including us, right? Like if you're like, okay, we created 3/4 of the jobs, like everyone kind of just says like, well, good enough. And like including us sometimes, because again, it's like there's so many of these things that we're like we don't even hit all of them, but like it's stuff like this. It's again in this case better because it stopped, and then this is from like Congressman Morelli said the Department of Energy hasn't released any $375 million loan. It said no money's been involved yet. No public money is going to be involved until we get answers, till we can get back to the point where we're doing construction and back online. So again, at least that's
fair enough. Perhaps
yeah.
my criticism was a bit too pointed for this particular situation. It's just we've been through it so many times, Kevin, that I honestly forgive myself.
Yeah. No, it's fair enough. Like, well, it's about to get there, right? It's like getting like the county stuff would have kicked in as soon as like 100 people had jobs, right? Like, and all the county pilot tax breaks and the commuter stuff. And I think like the bigger point of like all of this is actually that what we need to do is make sure that the environment is better for New York State for these types of companies to succeed. And I've hit this before. And again, I've talked to like, county ledge folks and like, other folks, state level folks who've said like, well, it's necessary. I know we don't like it. I don't like it. You don't like it. I get it. But like, that's the only way businesses will come here. So we just got to give them a little something to get in, so that's why Comida is necessary. That's why like the state tax breaks are necessary. That's why we got to throw all these dollars at companies to try to get them to come here to build their factories. And long term, it's going to work out. I promise, bro, it's going to work out. They don't use bro, but like they might as well. I'm hearing bro in my head. But like, I promise this time it's going to work out.
This time it's going to be perfect, bro.
Yeah, no, bro, just one more subsidy, bro. Um, and but yeah, like, but again, like they're not like everyone's kind of committed to like the short term solution. Like, okay, well, just one more subsidy, we're gonna get them in, and then we're gonna have money, and then we can fix the environment, like, and then everything's gonna be great. But like, we never get to that part though. Like, even for the people who want to, and a lot of people don't want to fix the business environment in New York. They think it's good. They think that's what holding businesses accountable looks like, right? That's what like people paying their fair share looks like.
Oh, you're doing that so well, guys. I don't know if the
I know
radio audience,
it's terrible for radio because like they
yeah,
can't see the quotes
the radio,
making, but like I think you could hear them.
yeah, I think the radio audience probably gets a sense of it. But Kevin can be very expressive, and he was doing a little bit with his voice, but he was bringing the whole package there. There was this complete and utter disgust expressed at the government with his last little tirade, and I feel like I'm rubbing off on him. I feel like I'm having an effect. Was
So
beautiful.
every once in a while that comes out just because like I don't know, like I get sick of this stuff. Like I get sick of hearing like these excuses all the time. And I would love for folks to actually come in and get serious about like fixing it, right? Same thing like the last segment too. Like they're fixing like this very narrow aspect of like what is a problem while ignoring like the fundamental issues that are like relatively simple to fix. You just have to have the courage to say, you know what, maybe it's better if we just step out of the way. But that's for a lot of politicians, that's more frightening than the status quo. Stepping
Sure.
out of the way is scarier than letting people do their own thing, because what if they do something weird or dangerous or like something that just doesn't benefit me as a politician?
Yeah. 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 That's it. Yeah, I get it, man. It drives me crazy. And then too, when I look at these pilots and these credit farms and these situations, I always wondered like, how does someone who has a successful business in New York State not lose their freaking mind and just want to leave the state and go someplace else to get the same kind of sweetheart deal because they're paying the freight for this stuff.
Yeah. No, I mean that's well, and well, that's the thing is right. Like so, like a lot of businesses, like you try to get in on it, right? And some people like they care enough about the area that they want to start businesses. They find ways to make it work, even if like if they were in an easier environment, they would make more money, they'd be more successful, they would hire more people, right? And so like some of like what the damage looks like isn't always the business not opening. It's also sometimes the business not hiring 3 or 4 more employees that they could hire, that people, would go to if they, had the opportunity, or, those employees making a little bit less than they otherwise might to support their family and support other businesses.
Yeah.
And that's some of the like the unseen stuff that we don't always get, when we think about like that at like an economic level. It's not always like the the big flashy thing. Sometimes it's the suit not bought, because like, we think about that in terms of like the broken window fallacy thing, right?
Absolutely, Kevin.
Um,
Yeah.
there's a lot of broken windows that are a little bit more subtle because they're just like in regulatory policy and tax policy. Like, it's oh sure, like we're creating the work of compliance, but that cost that goes towards compliance or whatever else doesn't go towards something that could have been more productive. Compliance is basically like broken windows, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. We do get caught up. Our whole government runs on the broken window fallacy. We've got a economic growth of 4% and like an inflation rate of more than 4%, and people are like, "Well, everything's fine." And I don't understand how we end up getting there. Like, how have people been so convinced about this situation that they celebrate a 4% growth in GDP when we're dropping bombs all over the world? I'm sorry. I'm getting
Oh,
no,
no, I know. I will. No, I like. Eventually, we're gonna get to that topic too, because folks listening on WSL on the radio show, we're gonna jump it actually to a heavier topic after the show. But we got like 4 minutes left, and I totally forgot to put that on like our list of issues, like the new like GDP growth numbers that came out recently, and like what they mean.
they don't mean
Because
anything. They don't mean any. We're still a net loser. But
Right.
people
Well,
don't.
look, I mean, but like you call the Biden people like, look, this is Bidenomics. Look how great our economy is doing. We're not in a recession because look, we have growth. But the problem is that growth kind of comes concurrently with inflation. And they're like, but inflation is down, except for if you count all the things that like really matter and we spend a bunch of money on like housing and food and like energy. Like if you
Energy, yeah.
ignore all those things that
If
are
you
going up.
And people are like, why does the US have the best inflation rate in the world? And it's like, because those other countries count those things in their inflation rate. Like, what
Yeah.
is wrong with you? How long, how many lies can you be told and
Yeah.
still keep going? Like, I don't get it.
Right. And people are scratching their heads like, oh man, it's so weird because normally when the economy's doing this good, people say the economy's doing good, but like now, for some reason, people think the economy's doing bad. Why is there the difference? And
You
it's like,
sound
oh
like
yeah,
Paul
maybe
Krugman.
maybe all the consumers are just too stupid to realize the economy's good or people are too polarized. Or or hear me out, maybe you're measuring the wrong thing and like the personal situations of a bunch of people don't match up with these macro numbers that don't actually mean anything for families living it day to day.
Well,
Maybe.
$20 for a Big Mac, $15 for a Big Mac meal. I mean, inflation is real. It's devastating our economy. And look, even the auto workers signed this great contract. But when I look at how much inflation that they have suffered, they're just like the rest of us. The contract doesn't really look that good. It's just like you're trading dollars. Like maybe they picked up some nice benefits. I don't know, but
Yeah.
inflation is undercounted as a theft of value, and you got guys like Paul Krugman, a Nobel Prize winning economist, parroting the talking points of the Biden administration. And frankly, if I was that guy, I would be embarrassed, but he just keeps going. He's like, we solved it. Inflation is down. It's like inflation is, first of all, not zero. It's down from a really high percentage to a slightly lower percentage. So it still
Right.
exists.
You gotta love the
I mean,
folks who are like, look, inflation over the last 6 months is down. Mission accomplished, boys. And I'm like, wait, okay, let's zoom out a little bit more and see how we're looking.
mission accomplished is perfect because that's
Yes.
exactly the kind of vibe I'm getting. The mission accomplished of heading into a 20-year war. It's like, whoa, you guys, this is bad. But arguably, I don't know how to convince more people. Like, we already have smart people in the audience. We already have smart people that listen to us on the radio. We already interact with smart people on Twitter that understand the things that we're saying. But how do we reach other people with this message, Kevin? Keep trying, I guess, right?
Yeah, keep trying.
Yeah.
No, just gotta keep doing this. And we only have like 30 seconds left. I wanted to get this comment from Paul Andrew on Facebook. Said these are the same people that think we need an inflation reduction check for economic.
Oof. Oof. Yeah, it's
I
true.
love that's always
True, though.
kills me. Like, oh, here's more money to deal with inflation. Ah. All right, now I don't know what you do about that, but and yeah, Sam says, what do we do? Like, comment, share on social media. Yeah, share the show,
That would
folks.
be good. We would
Appreciate it.
that for sure.
Yeah, get the word out. All right, so we're out of time for the radio show. Thank you, WYSL audience, for listening to A Free Solution. We will be back next week. Have a great night, folks. Take care. All right.
All right, man. Well, that was a pretty good show.
Yeah, fun, folks. And actually, when they get the Shelley's talking about like tax accountants, and that's how small businesses survive. Like again, that's what I'm talking about with like the broken window stuff, with like compliance stuff. And actually, there's an interesting thing where Republicans are tying Israeli aid right now to like they want to cut the service for like the IRS just releasing like free tax software to pay for the Israeli aid. Not like the only time they care about money.
Oh my God.
But like the tax filing stuff, and again, this isn't anything like against individual tax accountants who are like in the most part, like for the most part, just like trying to help businesses thrive. They're trying to help them comply with the law and do their thing, and do everything right. Like, it's nothing against individual tax accountants, but it is an expense imposed on us that looks like it's a job creating measure because, like, oh, look, all the tax accountants, look at all these jobs that were made and like a thriving industry that is around because we have this tax code. But it's an expense that small businesses have to pay to show that they're complying with the law that they then can't spend on other things. Again, either capital equipment or employees
Or new
to invest and
shoes,
grow in
for
their
Christ's
business.
sakes, for their
Oh yeah,
kids,
stuff to
you know?
themselves, right? Like
Yeah.
whatever it is. That's the broken. That's why I compared it to the broken windows fallacy, because like people, like usually people in the industry themselves, they talk about like all the jobs that are made by like having this, and why like Intuit and these other tax filing companies don't really like the idea of like free tax filing software for a lot of filers, or um you know, like a more simplified tax code, is because like they're trying to protect their own jobs. And
Sure.
they'll talk to members of Congress as if like that is a benefit in and of itself to protect the jobs of these people who are paying for compliance. And again, nothing against those individuals who are tax accountants and lawyers and CPAs and all that stuff. Like individually, on an individual level, they're trying to do a good job and help their friends and businesses. Like, and I mean that in the most genuine way possible. But the system itself has really bad incentives.
It the whole entire system is based upon a broken windows fallacy of
Yeah.
we're going to break something or make something very hard for you, and then we're going to brag about the jobs that we make. Like we just sold $100 billion worth of lethal aid to Ukraine, right? And, and we're counting that as an economic win. And the, I always want to make the point, like the best value that a bomb might have is against a future attack against the United States. So its value exists, right? You can make a bed frame out of a bomb. You can make other things out of a bomb. But okay, so once we have them, fine, we're ready to defend ourselves, right? And but then when we blow them up, what did we do? We just expended this massive amount of wealth that we now have to replace with another massive amount of wealth. They're very expensive to make. And so it's a net contraction of the wealth of the world when we're blowing up bombs all over the place. And I know that's like sounds simplistic, but I don't know a better way to throttle it home to people where they get this
Yeah.
grasp of, hey, an unexpended military ordinance is an asset. An expended military ordinance is a destruction of wealth.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're blowing up well. I mean, that's actually one of the things that Ron Paul said that kind of got my wheels turning, is like, we don't build an economy by building weapons and blowing stuff, sending it overseas and blowing it up, right? Like that doesn't create wealth, that destroys wealth. You know, I do think about that stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
And then they crow about a growth in GDP, and the growth in GDP hasn't even really caught up with inflation. And it's not that great when it is in fact lethal aid that is growing the GDP and inflation. So that to me is like
it's
a
part of it.
moral
Again, like
problem.
in inflation, that is, I think that's an important point to make too. Like not just the lethal aid thing, but like the inflation part. Like the economy can be growing, and sometimes the economy growing like exacerbates inflation.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
can be like part of it. And so like the economy could be growing on paper, but like your situation could be getting worse off.
Yeah. Yeah,
And that
absolutely, right? Like, people with money in savings accounts are losing value every single day. And now I read a story, Kevin, about a guy in England who they took his money and as part of their retirement program, they'll take money out of stocks and mutual funds in England and they'll put them into like bonds for the government and local municipal bonds, right?
right.
And so as the interest rate went up, this is supposed to be the safest place for the money to transition into your savings account, right? So as the interest rate went up, the value of his bonds decreased. This guy had like $300,000. He now has $110,000 because of the devaluation and the timing. Like he got unlucky with the timing too, right? But this guy literally lost $180,000 of his 180 pounds of his retirement program because of this devaluation of the currency, the change in the
Wow.
value of bonds, and the interest rate, the response to the economy. and the goal of forcing people to consume less so that we could lower the inflation rate. Like, let's not underestimate that. Like, that's a real thing that they're doing. So it's frustrating. Congratulations, though, to George Santos. Just a segue
George
away from
Santos.
this. This guy survives. He's a survivor, Kevin.
He is gonna stay in Congress. They held another vote, or a vote. I don't remember. It was another one to expel him, and the vote failed.
Congratulations, buddy.
Yeah, it's like 194 to whatever, like 200 something.
He wasn't even close. He's staying.
Yeah, no, 213 to 179.
Yeah, not even close, man. That's a margin. Like, some Democrats voted for him. You know what I mean? Like, he
Expel
gets
the
to
guy.
stay.
Congratulations, your man is staying. We get to enjoy George Santos for a little while longer. Could have made a real run at speaker there. Didn't take it.
Nobody asked him. I don't. So look, I get with the liberals on this one, right? We've got a actually, you know what? If you let me, I'm going to keep talking about the war in Israel and Palestine because I'm very frustrated with it. But
no, go ahead.
All right. Well, I do kind of want to pivot away from it for a minute because I spent some time on Friday night with a group of like a Kennedy coalition, like they're doing online Twitter spaces and stuff like that, and I absolutely enjoyed the experience. I enjoyed their hopeful exuberance. I enjoyed talking with them. I made the points that you and I often talk about, where Kennedy's just a guy that's going to substitute his package of cronies into this system that's already dysfunctional. And they're like, yeah, but he's the right guy to do it, And I'm like, I get it. They want the right guy to come along to save us from this technocracy, this conundrum that we're in. And I don't know, but they're really nice. So I don't know.
Well, yeah. No, I hear you. I don't want to be like mean to the folks who are fans of Kennedy. Like, I think you and I share the same criticism of it, which is like, y'all are missing how he isn't going to fundamentally change things. He's just going to replace it like with his own people who want to do their version of the same thing.
Yeah.
So
that's it.
Yeah, can't the guy.
It. And we're not going to gut the state power. We're not going to deal with entrenched systems. He was a big disappointment. Like, I think there's a lot of room for nuanced positions on the Palestine-Israeli conflict. Okay. And his position wasn't particularly nuanced. Like, it wasn't particularly. And this new Speaker of the House, I was all excited because all the left hated him, And he's like, well, God.
Not a good enough reason to like someone.
God commands us to defend Israel. And I'm like, yeah, but that's because they're going to usher in the end of the world. Like let's not bring the Bible in. That's all I'm saying. Like, let's not use biblical references. Like,
yeah.
I support Israel's right to defend itself, Kevin. Like, I get it. And I really want them to destroy Hamas. I get that. There's just a little bit of the destruction. A lot of the destruction makes me very sad.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's tough to, immediately believe everything that's out there, but the bombing that seems to have hit the refugee part of Gaza, where people were trying to shelter, and that seems bad. And there's a lot of people, a lot of families who died in that situation.
Yeah. And
for like, just so far, it doesn't seem like a lot of gain for Israel. Like, just, I don't think it's like they're just like indiscriminately like killing the civilians. Like, I don't think that's quite it.
The argument,
but it is
presented, right? May I present the argument? Is if someone is shooting at you from behind an innocent person, like, what do you do? And you're like,
yeah,
I get it, but that's not exactly a great analogy. And to use that analogy, like, use it once, fine. You get somebody back on their heels and you make them think. But to use it over and over and over and over again is when streets are being leveled, it doesn't match the reality. Okay, doesn't match the reality of what's going on. Also, like, I don't know, man. It's very frustrating for me. I appreciate nuanced positions, and that's great. I think that when it does come to war, hard choices are the reality. And when one government pledges unlimited resources for you to fight the battle, wage your war any way you want to, I think that that concerns me that morality gets tossed out the window there. I don't know,
Yeah,
like
no, it does too, like it's and I have to like weigh this against like I know some people like I don't fully buy the argument that Israel is engaging in like a genocide campaign. Like there's a bunch of folks
sure,
who are making that argument that, oh, they're just trying to wipe Gaza off
I
the
agree.
map and like kill everyone. Like that's not really how they're engaging in it. The way like the totally valid criticism of Israel though is that in order to hit legitimate military targets, they're willing to accept a much higher level of civilian casualties. And this is like a clinical way of saying, but they're willing to accept a much higher level of civilian casualties than the US would, and certainly what I am comfortable with. And by civilian casualties is such a like a clinical term to mean like innocent men, women, and children dying, like being blown apart.
Yeah.
Um, like in like families like mine who are just trying to like live their lives. And I know they're trying to go after legitimate military targets in a lot of these cases because Hamas like has tunnels underground and they hide their munition stuff in schools and churches and hospitals and all this stuff like because Hamas like sucks.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, Hamas is awful, man, and I would like them to be eradicated, but there is a this isn't good enough, right? Even if the United States and Israel supported Hamas in the past, what they were doing in the past was building schools and holding elections, right? So
right.
when we supported them, that's in part what they were doing. Sure, it was a destabilization strategy, right? Where it separated Hezbollah from Hamas. Like a lot of that is
Right.
irrelevant to a religious theocracy that hasn't had elections in 15 years. Okay. Like,
Right. They had,
so
they had one sort of election where they got a plurality in 2006 and then have been like just the worst
yeah,
since.
yeah, they're just awful. So yeah, I would love it if Hamas was eradicated. I don't know that I don't know that they will be. It's
No.
hard to exterminate an idea, right? Even
Yeah.
if the
And
idea
it's
is
one of those
vicious.
things too, again, like every time like something like that bombing that happened with that refugee camp, like how many people were radicalized because of that? How many people are so angry because their family, their brothers, sisters, nieces, nephews, whatever died that they're willing to go and like follow the most radical people to try to exterminate the government that did this. Um
See, that's common sense, but then there's a whole faction of the United States that are going to call you a Hamas sympathizer for those expressing those kind of views,
yeah.
and I thought that we were
No,
better.
I know, like, people do that too, like, like, kinda like, it's so weird. I mean, I did see that, like, there's the old, like, Jon Stewart when he was on The Daily Show sketch where, like, he tried to, like, talk about the Israeli-Palestine conflict, like, this must've been, like, the intifada in 2006. Tried to talk about it in a nuanced way, and just every time he talked, like, a group of people would come up and yell at him. That's uh
Yeah.
and so, like, I saw that making the rounds, and that's kinda how it ends up being, right? Like, I mean, we talk about it on the show, but, like, yeah, it's unfortunately, it's people feel very passionately about picking a side in this, and to me, it's like, there's a bunch of innocent people caught between a bunch of, like, terrible, terrible folks,
They're getting tossed
Hamas being
into a
one of
meat
them.
grinder, bro,
They're
like
getting tossed
innocent.
into a meat grinder, and,
Yeah.
like, the Israeli citizens, the people of Palestine and Gaza, they're getting torn up, and, like, I get, like I tend to actually be somewhat more sympathetic to, like, the Israeli government side, but it's, like, every time they do something like that, where they make maybe the hard choices that I'm just, too cowardly to make about trying to eliminate a existential threat to, like, their existence.
I'm not
I
first of all, I'm not gonna buy that that's a cowardly position, all right? I just because I'm anti-war, I think that I find that it's look, let me put it to you this way. Nikki Haley gained steam over her support for a Department of Defense and unwavering support
Oh,
of
I almost
Israel.
forgot about that dumb virtue signaling.
Yeah, so but
Yeah, the
she
Department of
gained in the
Defense.
polls, bro. Like she
Yeah.
gained in the polls. So it's you're not the coward. People are angry and they're easily manipulated. Which separates me from a whole group of people that I care about, right? Like, but still,
Yeah.
that seems to be real.
No, I mean that's the thing. That's and there's some aggressively pro-war folks out there. Including folks I thought were like maybe I had agreed with quite a bit, and they've changed their tune
Yeah.
a bit
Yeah.
on this, which is like, and again, weirdly, like on both sides of this, like
Yeah.
on like the like pro-Israel, like we should do whatever, like the Israel should be just unleashed, and then like on the weirdly like pro-Hamas side where people are just and I say that like legitimately pro-Hamas side, like people who I liked and respect who were like just talking about like, oh, this is like freedom fighting. I'm like, what are you talking about? This is
There's no
murdered,
good
like,
analogy to
yeah,
a religious theocracy. And look, no, but I don't think any conversation about Israel and Palestine can be effective without saying they're not only blocked in by Israel, but they're blocked in by the rest of the Middle East through Egypt
yeah,
as well. Like they it's whatever is going on there is disgusting. And arguably again, the solution I come to is that Israel responsibly annihilates Hamas
yeah.
and
Just
completely assimilates the Gaza, like the whole Palestinian concept. And
it's gonna be messy,
it would be messy, right?
and
But
people are gonna be mad about it. But like, oh, look, they're just occupying them more.
in a generation of real assimilation, or 2 generations, that
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. I know it's crazy. It's crazy. It's crazy.
yeah, that makes sense to me. Even though who'd I see? Might be like Matt Iglesias is like, hey, if everyone could just like have totally different and more reasonable preferences over there, that would be great.
That would
Uh,
that would be just great. That would be
yeah.
really good for everybody.
Yeah, just like both the Palestinians and the Israelis. Like, if you could get better opinions, that would be awesome.
That would be just great. If you guys could all just like, and look, they can't, right? But we're saying, could you guys all just take a breath? They can't right now. They
Yeah.
have
Yeah, and like
they
the
have
Israelis, they're like, hey, will you do a ceasefire? And the Israelis are like,
nope.
no, we still have hostages over there. So no, we're not doing a ceasefire. Which is not a totally unreasonable thing
No,
either. But
I don't where my biggest disappointment in Israel is that the promise of protection by an authoritarian regime, and regardless of whether he's a complete authoritarian and completely in power or not, Benjamin Netanyahu is very authoritarian. But the promise of safety from an authoritarian government is a failure. It doesn't work, right? There's strength in unity. There's strength in self protection, and that's gun control in Israel contributed to this mess. The promise of a authoritarian government providing you security is always going to fail until there's
yep,
always going to be a workaround. There's a workaround around the Iron Dome, apparently, right? Like that's a reality. What do we do about it? I don't know. We can talk about it all we want. Luckily, and thanks to the United States, we have the freedom to talk about it.
yeah, right.
So that's good. But I still want the best possible outcome for everyone, and I don't know what that is. You know,
Yeah.
silly.
Yeah. Well, anyway, we should probably call it a night though. I'm gonna edit this. Um and I'm gonna share both
That
sides of
one,
the Gaza Strip are theocracies. Yeah.
it does seem like that, doesn't it?
Yeah, that kind of is. That's
It's a
I mean,
controversial thought, right?
no,
Like,
I mean, but like it's true. Like Gaza is pretty obvious, but like Israel was created as like it's not like exactly theocratic nation state, but it is like a nationalist project. Which is interesting talking to my Jewish friend who's very much on the left who talked about like he was a fan of like nationalism.
Yeah.
And like to me, like it sounds like he said like, oh yeah, like I'm like a national socialist. I'm like, do you know how that sounds, bud?
You're not using.
Yeah, because
Wow.
he's on the left. So yeah, I'm nationalist socialist.
Oh,
I'd pick a different phrase, man. But
yeah,
but like again, his family is from like Iran, and they came in as refugees, and they came into Israel because like they felt that that was the only way their family could survive, and that's how like a lot of people ended up there.
sure.
And they're like, well, existence in other places, especially in the Middle East, means death. So like this is the solution, as we have picked like a ground to hold and to protect ourselves and try to live and eke out a living. I'm like, well, sort of get it.
Yeah,
Oh,
we do get it. We do. And
Um,
we're 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 pontificating from our comfy desks, and
yep.
it's a beautiful life that we have, and so I'm sad when I see people have not the same opportunities that we have. To just philosophically discuss for 25 minutes their
Right.
problems, right? And to criticize the government's picayune, bizarre, well-intentioned concepts where they're just going to make the rich richer and the poor, the middle class smaller, like that's what they're doing. So,
Yeah. All right. Anyway, hey, this folks, thanks for listening today. Appreciate y'all being here. Shelly, Paula, Sam, all your folks, Vince, are great. Just shared a
Facebook
couple
user.
articles. Yeah, Facebook user. Love your Facebook user. Appreciate y'all being here. We're gonna call it a night. Take care, folks.